They have a pretty good idea of whodunit. It's just a matter of finding the proof. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Kimberly Stephan and Dennis Young. Viewer discretion is advised. This case took place in Greenville, which is in Ohio. Kimberly Stephan was born on October 1st, 1958. She grew up with two biological brothers, but she also had a couple other siblings through, I believe, previous marriages with her parents. At the time this case occurs, she is 33 years old, and she herself is a mother to two teenage boys. Kimberly was, she worked at the Darke County Council on Rural Services, and she was also a member of the American Legion and Eagles Lodge auxiliaries. When this case occurred, Kimberly was in the process of actually divorcing her husband, Robert. And it was not exactly an amicable divorce. It was amicable on her end, but definitely not on his. She actually ended up having to file restraining orders against him until the divorce was finalized, and she was granted that restraining order. And also, Kimberly at the time was dating a 55-year-old man named Dennis Young, who would go by Denny to a lot of people. He was born on January 2nd, 1942. He also had been in a previous relationship. His wife had passed away some years prior, and he also had two children of his own. Dennis was working at the Speedway Starvin Marvin station in Greenville. He was also a retired master sergeant of the U.S. Army. He had served in the Vietnam War. He was also a member of the American Legion Veterans of Foreign Wars and the Elks, Moose, and Eagles Lodge. On February 24th, 1997, Kimberly's teenage sons had not heard from her in a day or so. They hadn't seen her since the night prior, I should say. And they became very concerned. Now, I'm not sure what the living situation was like, but it sounded like Kimberly would stay at Dennis's house often. I just don't know if the two boys were living with their father at the time or they were living in a house with their mom. That being said, like I said, they hadn't heard from her since about the afternoon or late evening prior. And so on his way to school one day, her 15-year-old son will stop by Dennis's house where he assumed his mom might be. When he arrived and knocked on the door, nobody answered. He went around back and he found that the back door was unlocked, and so he let himself in. And he found something that no child should ever have to find. His mother, dead. Dennis, also dead. Both of them had been shot to death. The murder weapon was nowhere in the house. So they know that this wasn't a murder-suicide or anything like that. Someone did this to both of them. Obviously, police are notified right away, and when they arrive, they do confirm that they have two deceased bodies in the house, both confirmed shot to death. There were no obvious signs of forced entry. The house didn't look like it was rummaged through. Nothing really appeared to have been stolen. Everything about the house seemed relatively normal, except for the two bodies inside. Given the fact that her son said the back door was unlocked, they assumed that this was likely how their killer entered the home. They did dust it for fingerprints. They dusted several things, including, I guess, some breaker box or some kind of thing outside the house near where the door was. They dusted them for fingerprints, but those fingerprints have never come back to anyone. So they go right into, well, who would have done this and why? If this wasn't a robbery, because again, nothing appeared to have been stolen, Kimberly wasn't sexually assaulted, so this wasn't a sexually motivated crime, who would have done this to her and to Dennis? They had one person in mind very quickly, because people in Kimberly's life would tell police about her soon-to-be ex-husband, Robert. So, like I said, she had gotten a restraining order, and that restraining order included demanding that he be forbidden from contacting, annoying, harassing, molesting, striking, injuring, or disturbing her at any point during the divorce. Robert and Kimberly, I guess, had owned a fairly large farm property, and if Kimberly died, pretty much most of that farm property would go to Robert. And having a farm property in this particular area of Ohio at that time, that was a great thing to have. You're going to make some money with it. As someone said, a detective in this case, around here, land is money. The divorce was actually about to be finalized. 6 days prior to the double homicide, a judge had scheduled a hearing to finalize the split the following month. But then the double murders happened, and then 10 days after that, that entire case was dismissed. The case can't move forward because Kimberly is dead. Robert, the ex-husband, had a history of being violent, of being very belligerent, very mentally, verbally abusing. Not exactly the greatest person in the world. He was pretty much their one and only suspect in this case, but they have to prove that. They never found the murder weapon. They have searched for it, but they've never found it. Well, one day Robert would visit the gravesite of his ex-wife, Kimberly, and when he got there, he saw Kimberly's family mourning her, crying. He approaches them, armed with a gun, which would later be determined not to be the gun used in the double homicide, and he started brandishing that gun in front of them, scaring them, telling them to get out of there, to leave, get away from the grave. And then around that same time, he had also been, I guess he'd been waving his gun from his car at people, I think her family. So in December of 1997, he was charged with aggravated menacing, improperly handling a gun in a motor vehicle, also drug abuse and possession of drug paraphernalia. He ends up pleading guilty to all of those charges, and he was sentenced to like a brief time in prison. Obviously, given this behavior, waving a gun in front of a grieving family at Kimberly's grave, this is not going to help him. This does not help Robert whatsoever in taking away, people's eyes off of him from this case of being a suspect. That only amplifies his potential guilt in all of this. When the murder happened, police would interview neighbors in the area to see if they saw or heard anything, if they knew of any issues that maybe Dennis was having with anyone. Maybe this wasn't motivated by someone on Kimberly's side. Maybe it was motivated by someone on Dennis's side. However, after interviewing his friends, his coworkers, his family, they could come up with no one in his life that would have had a motive to do this. So again, they go back to Robert as being the only viable suspect in this case. The problem, though, is that they don't have much evidence. Like I said, they dusted for fingerprints. Those fingerprints have apparently never come back to Robert. They don't have any proof of stolen items, so they can't see if maybe any stolen items were pawned off somewhere, because sometimes they can do that. Nobody could actually physically place Robert at the scene. However, when police investigated his alibi, he had none. He could not provide an alibi. And so by his own admission, he was available to commit this double homicide, which they believe happened probably the night before the bodies were found by her son. Over the years, they have apparently tested other pieces of evidence for not, because there was no additional blood at the scene that did not come back to matching the two victims. There was no foreign hairs. There was no male bodily fluid, nothing like that. So they didn't have much DNA in that sense. They have been hoping that in the years afterwards, when DNA technology kept getting more advanced and more advanced, that perhaps they'll be able to use this touch DNA, this kind of new cool thing, to see if they can find anything. Unfortunately, because of how many times they've tested the evidence over the years, by the time it came to potentially look at touch DNA, all of the samples they had that they could have likely pulled DNA from, they've been depleted, which means there's no more DNA to be found. A lot of times they take that gamble, they take that risk. We're going to keep testing this to see if we can come up with anything, and unfortunately in this case, that gamble ended up hurting them. Perhaps. I mean, they don't even really know if there was touch DNA to begin with. So at this point, all they have is their suspicions of Robert Stephan doing this. He is the one with the means and the motive. He is the one with a violent history. He had again been convicted of waving and brandishing a gun at the victim's family members while they were mourning her. He was set to inherit a large portion of land, which I'm not 100% sure if he actually inherited it or not. But because he was never actually formally labeled a suspect by the police, just really he's kind of like, he's our person of interest. They really couldn't do much in terms of like not letting him, have the land. So, but I just don't know if he actually got it or not. And so sadly, they can really only depend now at this point on people coming forward, witnesses. So maybe someone Robert had bragged about killing these two. People maybe have suspicions of him. Maybe maybe he didn't tell them anything, but maybe he has behavior that's like, wait a minute, I think he might have actually done this. They are relying on that. They're relying on people, on witnesses, circumstantial evidence, that kind of thing, because unfortunately, physical evidence-wise, they are pretty much It's all depleted. It's gone. Not to say that there was really much to begin with anyway. Again, the murder weapon has never been found. They did search for it. They searched the surrounding areas, but they couldn't find anything. The bullets did not match the gun that he had used at the cemetery. And I don't know if they were able to trace any other gun purchases to Robert's name to see if maybe a previous gun purchase would have matched the ammunition used. I'm not 100% sure. There doesn't really appear to be a ton of background information on this. I found several newspaper clippings, but a lot of it's just sort of kind of repeated information. Kimberly Stephan and Dennis Young were both gunned down in Dennis's home for reasons unknown. Both of them were parents to children from previous relationships. Both of them were well liked. Both of them were hard workers, trying to support their families. And neither of them deserved what happened to them. And they do deserve to have their day in court and have their killer be brought to justice. But that is going to rely on you, the public. There is currently still a $5,000 reward for any information that helps lead to the capture of Kimberly and Dennis's murderer. Someone somewhere out there has got to know the truth, and perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on this case, please contact the Greenville Police at 937-548-4150. If you know something, if you saw something, please say something. Help Kimberly and Dennis and their families, their children, get the justice they both very rightfully deserve. But that is it for this case. True crime, a Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously. So please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. Hit the like button, leave a comment. That way it gets pushed out to more people. Hit the bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. You can find the link to my TikTok in the description of this video below within the link tree. I do also post compilation videos from my TikTok page from the previous month at the beginning of each month here on YouTube. Also in that link tree, you'll find my case list. It's got about 7,200 plus names on it. I typically choose my cases I cover at random. If you want to recommend a case to me, my email is listed below in the description. All I need to know is the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened, and I'll add it to the list. Like I said, I typically choose them at random. However, if you are a loved one to a missing person or an unsolved cold case murder, let me know in that email that you are a direct loved one, and I can make sure that case gets a higher priority. But that's actually it for this video, True Crime Maroonies. So until the next case, ta-ta for nowsy poopsies. Again with the poopsies. Don't do it again, Mike. Okay, great. Bye.